Goffstown. Welcome to another edition of Goffstown School Board Watch, where public comment is always open. I'm your host, Donna Pinard. And I do not have a guest with me this evening on our show. I am here alone, and I'm going to tell you the date. It's July 23rd, 2012, and it's 6 p.m. And the reason I'm telling you the date is because this show is all about the Mountain View Middle School Study Committee, which begins its work this week. They will meet for the first time on July 26th and the second time on August 9th, at which times they will complete their work, the goal is to guide a consultant, an unbiased consultant, on the facts and data that we already know about Mountain View Middle School. If you have been following, there's three major issues that we're looking at, and that's leadership, rigor, academic rigor, whether it's hard enough, curriculum, and the third is discipline, a safe school environment. These are some of the major concerns that have come out of the Area Agreement Committee, which is New Boston, Dunbarton, and Goffstown together, as New Boston and Dunbarton consider whether or not they want to remain as a part of the SAU 19. If you are a Goffstown resident, and if you're watching this, then most likely you are a voter here in Goffstown, your taxes will go up if the towns of New Boston and Dunbarton decide to pull their children out of the SAU 19 and allow them to go to a different town. Dunbarton is seriously considering Bow, New Hampshire. New Boston, I believe, is seriously considering Bedford. So our taxes will go up. Their taxes will probably go up as well if they choose to leave our district, but our taxes will definitely go up if they choose to leave us. So those are the three areas: academic rigor, discipline or safe school environment, and the leadership. So I would like to read to you regarding academic rigor and the culture at Mountain View Middle School, meaning discipline, the area of discipline. In the New Boston Bulletin, there was an article that says students speak out about MVMS. So I'd like to read and then respond to some of the comments that students, New Boston students, have made about their transition from New Boston Central School, which goes up to grade 6, and then they merge with us at Mountain View Middle School in grade 7. On June 4th, the school board held another area meeting to discuss the various possibilities for the education of New Boston's middle and high school students. That meeting, of course, was a New Boston School Board meeting. For this meeting, current and former students from Mountain View Middle School and Goffstown High School were asked to attend and provide input to several questions posed by the Area Study Committee. A number of students attended the meeting, while others responded in writing. At their request, I agreed not to mention the current MVMS students by name in this article. Don't you find it interesting that you can't even mention the comments that an MVMS student, a current MVMS student, is making? And that's the leadership problem. It was interesting that all spoke to a similar theme in their concerns with the middle school. It was also apparent that the concerns of former students revolved around MVMS, with all expressing great satisfaction with their experience at Goffstown High. In my humble opinion, the difference would be leadership. They enjoy their experience here at Goffstown High School because the leadership here at Goffstown High School does a good job. They actually do their job. They actually do over and above their job. The middle school students noted that the transition from New Boston Central School was eye-opening. While acknowledging that these early teenage years present their own set of challenges for all kids, they were disturbed by the lack of consistent discipline at MVMS, and that a non-bullying policy did not seem to be followed. So let me just talk about discipline at Mountain View Middle School and policies at Mountain View Middle School. It has been my experience when I was employed at Mountain View Middle School that policies are randomly, by the principal, Jim Hunt, disregarded. So for instance, let's take a really minor one. There is a policy that you can't wear hats at Mountain View Middle School. Students aren't allowed to wear hats for all of the reasons that you can think of. Hats, then you have the friend who flips off the hat. That's teenage years. But of course they use the fact that it's teenage years to say that that's why middle school is having such a hard time. But other middle schools in the state of New Hampshire are not having the problems that they're having. So what's the problem? Same age, same kids. So hats were not allowed. You can wear hats here at the high school, but they were not allowed at the middle school. Teachers, under the former principal, before Jim Hunt got here, used to enforce that rule. They would say hats off in the morning, take your hats off. They would not allow students to wear hats. When Jim Hunt arrived, teachers were enforcing the hat rule. He told them to disregard it. Disregard the hat rule. Students can now wear them. It's okay. At a faculty meeting, he made a big issue of the fact that wearing hats is not the biggest deal in the world, so it's no problem. Okay. Except that the school board didn't change the dress code rules. So in the student handbook, it still said no hats. So if you're going to arbitrarily change the rule, then don't put it in writing. If you're a teacher in the district, your job is to enforce the rules of the school board. Jim Hunt did not go to the school board requesting that that rule be taken off the books. He just arbitrarily chose no longer to enforce it. Before Jim Hunt got here to our lovely town, we had a rule where if a child was out of dress code, oh yes, there is a dress code. If a child was not in the proper dress code, you would send them to the nurse. First you'd speak to them as a teacher. If it didn't change, then you would send them to the nurse, and the nurse would keep clean t-shirts to put on the child if the child was wearing things that were not appropriate, or call home and ask the parents to come, and if that was not possible, she'd put a t-shirt on them. Jim Hunt arbitrarily, without even communicating to staff that he was changing that rule, changed it. All of a sudden, you're sending a child to the nurse and you're being told by the nurse, we're no longer doing that. Well, why didn't the principal communicate that? So now it was left into the teacher's hands. But if the teacher put a t-shirt on the child, he didn't want that. I mean, you didn't find that out until you put a t-shirt on the child. So again, communication. So there's a leadership problem, and there's also the principal deciding arbitrarily that it's his castle and the dress code doesn't matter. It doesn't apply to him. He can apply whatever he feels like. It's kind of cafeteria style. Let's look through the handbook. Let's look through the policies. Let's look through the procedures that the Goffstown School Board has voted in, and let's arbitrarily decide which one of these do we want to enforce and not enforce. And then we don't even communicate which ones he's decided he wants to do. So therein lies the problem. So if you have a bullying policy, the principal decides bullying is just part of the age. Yeah, it happens. Deal with it. So we don't enforce bullying. So then we have stricter laws enforced regarding bullying, but as you can see, writing up a student for bullying doesn't get very far. So what happens? Teachers they begin to not write. Why waste the paper? Why waste the ink? As a matter of fact, when Jim Hunt's second year at Mountain View Middle School, he even attempted to take away the formal discipline slips that teachers used to fill out. First, he took it away from all the support staff. Support staff was no longer able to write up students. He forbade them from doing that. And these are the people who are on the front lines with the students, and sometimes with the most challenging students behavior-wise, but they're not allowed to write them up. So then they'd go to a teacher to ask them to write it up, but if the teacher didn't see the incident, then all you can do is say so-and-so reported. But they actually tried to take those discipline slips away in totality. However, the Goffstown Education Association's contract had wording in it that said you have to return a write-up of a student, a copy of that write-up, to the teacher. So that means it has to exist. So they reluctantly, they meaning Jen Gillis and Jim Hunt, reluctantly gave the discipline slips back. And then when that was pointed out, they were like, no, 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 teachers can write kids up. But is there any consequence that comes when a teacher writes them up? So when you have years of not having any consequences given when a student is written up, then teachers obviously just begin to not write them up. So that's part of, the complaint is that the bullying policy is not enforced. Policies are at whim. Either enforced or not enforced, and thrown out the, and in fact, he won't even tell the staff. They have to kind of find out in a roundabout way, oh, we're not doing that anymore. Okay, so the students said that, in general, they didn't feel safe because they had no one to go to. If you do not feel safe, you're not going to learn. What I found startling, and at first thought I had misheard, is that the acronym for the program where misbehaving students are sent is called Success. Really? Are they serious? What kind of message does this send? So the program Success has been called many things throughout the years. When I was there, as a matter of fact, for 2 years I actually worked in that program. It was called Alternative Ed. And Alternative Ed, when I was there, had a formal behavior program in place, and the program was successful. The teacher was very good. She knew what she was doing. The counselor was very good and knew what she was doing. And I was the paraprofessional. This was years ago, decades ago. And the program was successful. The program worked well. You're always going to have 2 to 3% of a population that are not going to be, shall I say, rule followers. They'd rather be rule breakers. So you're going to have those kinds of behaviors, and the public school has to deal with it. Now, if you sent your child to a private school, you wouldn't have the person necessarily sitting next to your child being the disruptive one, being part of that 2 to 3%, because the parents are paying for it. The kids have to buy in by signing a contract when they attend a private school. And they're more inclined to, because their parents are interested in academics, to pay attention to their academics. And so they do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it, and they are where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be. But the public school doesn't have that luxury. We have to educate all. So the program was called Alternative Ed. Then it became a BRAVE program, and no one alive remembers what an acronym for BRAVE, B-R-A-V-E, stands for. Nobody. I tried to find out even when I was there. I don't think it had an acronym. Now it's called Success. And various times throughout the years, it's had different teachers in that program, and some were more successful than others. Some weren't successful at all. But yes, that program does exist. And kids sometimes are always, because they get to go to the Y on Fridays, they get different programs to give them rewards for when they do what they're supposed to do. Other kids can't stand that. They're like, why? Why do they get that? Just because, you know, life is not fair. And in order to teach them, they have positive consequences as well as negative consequences. So there are programs set up for those kids. The other concern coming from the kids was that they were not being challenged in their coursework. This was backed up by several parents who acknowledged that their children were average students who suddenly were making all A's. They noted that homework was scarce to non-existent. So when Jim Hunt came to Mountain View Middle School in Goffstown, one of the very first seminars that I went to with an assistant principal that's no longer there, and I attended with a few other colleagues, was all about the fact that we shouldn't give homework, that there should be very limited amount of homework. The kids are overwhelmed, they have after-school activities, they need to have their family time, and therefore homework should be scarce. And they suggested that you limit homework based on the age of the child, of how many minutes per night a certain teacher could give. But of course, if they have a big project in a different class, then you're supposed to kind of weigh that out. They're going to be spending a couple hours studying for a test, or if they have a big presentation coming up, that the other teachers on the team should withhold giving homework. And so that's why you've seen a difference, where when I was in school or you were in school, we had hours of homework after school. That is no longer the case. They actually promote not doing that. They also spoke about general lack of cleanliness in the school, particularly in the bathrooms. Some great perspective came from former students. Lindsay Wiggin wrote about her transition from New Boston Central School to Mountain View Middle School. The hardest part of my transition was the shift in cultures. I believe that New Boston has a strong family and community culture, whereas Mountain View struggles to create a culture of community as well as strong connections between the entire school. If MVMS could improve the school's culture by maintaining that students are independent and responsible, while creating a stronger, more supportive school-wide community at the same time, I think that the school would have the chance to become a better place. And then the article continues on, and I'll let you read it if you can get a hold of it, that the former students give advice to the students coming up. And one of the things they did not want, one of the New Boston School Board asked them, do you think we should build our own middle school? In other words, they'd still keep the area agreement with Goffstown, but have 7th and 8th grade in New Boston and have them transition. Most of the students said no, that they wanted to make that transition out of their community at grade 7. So things that New Boston are considering. Okay, and that's in regards to discipline and academic rigor. But how about leadership? So I want to share an article, or an editorial, written by Jack Carbonneau from Goffstown. And this is in the Goffstown News, and it's July 5th, 2012. And he writes, consultant not needed to fix MVMS, just a passion to serve. Keyword there, serve. We don't have servant leadership at MVMS. We have leadership that wants to be served. So here's what Jack Carbonneau had to say to the editor. I am here to say that I don't think a consultant is needed to study problems at MVMS. I submit that you need only to have attended this year's MVMS promotion ceremony. There must be a video if you didn't attend. Now, the MVMS promotion ceremony, sometimes called recognition ceremony, is when 8th graders are leaving Mountain View Middle School and coming to Goffstown High School and making that transition. It is not called a graduation ceremony because a student can fail absolutely everything and still move on. Our district has a policy of no retention. They will use data to back up the fact that retention rarely helps a student catch up academically, and so you can fail. I've seen students fail absolutely every single subject and still walk at the recognition ceremony before coming up to the high school. So the fact that they fail here at the high school and don't earn credit might be their first eye-opening awakening of consequences for failing. And as much as it is told to them before they come here, a lot of them, that first semester of their 9th grade year where they're not passing, don't realize, oh, now I don't get credit? Oh, and I need so many, 22.5 credits here at Goffstown High School in order to have a Goffstown High School diploma. The state of New Hampshire requires 20 credits in order to have high school graduation. Goffstown School Board decided to add 2.5 credits to that, so in order to get a Goffstown High School diploma, you need 22.5. Back to the two principals spoke at this ceremony, and I believe to hear those speeches was to define what I want in a principal and what I don't want in a principal. I know I may not agree with everything a principal does. I may not agree with everything anybody does. But I do know I want to know why you're here. By the way, the two principals that spoke at the 8th grade recognition ceremony were Jim Hunt, current principal of Mountain View Middle School, and Frank McBride, the current principal at Goffstown High School. So he's going to talk about the two principals. That's who he's talking about. Now, one principal spoke early. When you're glad to be there, excited to see your child grow. He came to the podium, welcomed everyone, and began to talk about himself. His times in 8th grade, what it was like for him, where he went to college, and how he entered Outward Bound. All the while, you're hoping he will turn his statements and relate them in some way to the students or school. That time never comes. All the while, he breaks all rules of Public Speaking 101, hunched over the podium, reading from a prepared statement. Even when he speaks about Outward Bound, a program that is built on problem solving for a group, trusting in those around you, and community spirit, he speaks of opportunities it opened for him. Wanted to yell, "It's about kids, not you," but could not ruin it for my daughter that way, although she agreed she couldn't make sense of his speech. Very disappointing, sir. The second principal speaks at the end of the ceremony. That would be Frank McBride, the current principal of Goffstown High School. You are so ready to go. See your child and really don't want to hear anything else, but I hope you heard him. He spoke of his pride to wear school colors, how proud he was to be a leader of this school, how excited he was for the opportunity to educate our kids. He was not afraid to speak of the elephant in the room. He said, I know some of you are thinking of sending your kids to other schools, but I want a chance to tell you why you should come here. I'm just trying to save you $40,000 to $80,000 depending on your choice. I think it would be worth the price of a coffee to let me tell you what we have to offer. Oh, and by the way, he stood up, was animated, his speech was short, and he spoke from the heart. Thank you for your service, sir. Notice service. Service. Frank McBride was thanked for his service. He's a servant leader. Now, I have never been motivated to write to the Goffstown News in 44 years of living in town, and I don't know everything, but this has to be said. I want a principal who knows it's his job to serve the students in his school and is proud and excited to be that person who gets to lead a team, to educate the students, who gets to know them, share passions with them, share goals with them, and to help them all grow as much as they can while under his care, whatever path they choose. I do not want a principal who thinks it's a job and whose biggest concern is how do I keep my job. I don't want a principal who thinks it is all a numbers game. So, superintendent, it is your job to lead. What did you hear? You were there, sitting beside a matriarch and patriarch of Goffstown. I'm sure they heard what I heard, as many who were there heard. Are you ready to do your job? You need no consultant to fix this, just a passion to serve the community. Jack Carbonneau, Goffstown. So, committee we're getting anyway. So I want to talk about the committee. So, the committee. I did send a right-to-know request to Stacy Buckley asking who was going to be on the Mountain View Middle School Study Committee. As of 5 o'clock this evening, I did not receive a response. Her response to me was that all the people have not confirmed that they want to be on the committee, and as soon as they all do, she'll let me know who's on. Here are the people I do know have been chosen to work on the Mountain View Study Committee based on comments made at Goffstown School Board meetings, as well as comments made from people in town. So we have Jen Gillis, who is currently the assistant principal at Mountain View Middle School. We have Nicole Doherty, who is currently the curriculum coordinator at Mountain View Middle School. We have Elizabeth DeBrule, who is a citizen in Goffstown. We have Barbara French, who is a special ed teacher over at the middle school, and we have Mary Grassett, who is a teacher over at the middle school. All other people on the staff, whether paraprofessionals are chosen, when the support staff, I wrote an editorial that they weren't included. When the press release came up as to who the makeup of the committee, they weren't included. Now they're being included, so that has changed. Now somebody will be representing them, but I don't know who that is yet. But they start this Thursday, so it would be nice to know who's on the committee. So let's talk about the committee that chose who's on the committee. So we have an SAU committee. On that committee, we have Stacy Buckley, who's our current superintendent, Assistant Superintendent Brian Bulkey, Assistant Superintendent Mary Claire Berry, and the Human Resources Director, Carol Kilmister. Now, of those four, at least 3 are compromised. So now you have bias. You got 3 out of 4 biased people. Stacy Buckley, who told me herself that she supports Jim Hunt and everything he's doing at the middle school, is on this committee to choose the committee that's going to consider the problems at Mountain View. No bias there. Mary Claire Berry used to be the curriculum coordinator over at Mountain View Middle School under the previous principal, as well as when Jim Hunt was there. She worked very closely with Jim Hunt, and they were very friendly for the years that she was the curriculum coordinator at Mountain View Middle School. There's bias there. Then you have Carol Kilmister, who's the human resources person, and I have heard from different people who have gone to her that there wasn't much done. Sometimes she actually sat there and said absolutely nothing as they came forward with complaints about Jim Hunt at the middle school. So this bias there. Brian Bolke, I have heard all good things. I've only heard one negative from a former teacher who had dealings with him. I have had the opportunity to work sometimes with him as he's come, because he's the assistant superintendent in charge of special education, and I am a special education teacher in this district, so I have seen him, I have worked with him. I have no complaints. I have never seen anything that lacks integrity or character, or I haven't seen it. But I've heard one complaint that said he drank the Kool-Aid, but that was early on when he first got here. That was the first teacher that was actually picked on. Her name was Susan Hood. I believe she was on the radio with Rich Gerard at Gerard at Large, which is at 90.7 FM WLMW. He's on from 6 to 9 o'clock in the morning. He comments about things that happen in our town with our school all the time, with our schools, our SAU 19. So, and New Boston and the Erie Agreement and Dunbarton as well. So if you ever get a chance to 90.7 FM, WLMW. So there you have it. There's the SAU committee picking the MVMS study committee. Now, let's talk about the two administrators who are on the MVMS study committee. They are Jen Gillis. Jen Gillis is very close with Jim Hunt. They, have been seen carrying. He's been seen carrying her small child in and out of the building. They work together. I don't see anything that says that she doesn't support what he does. The staff, I've heard one good thing where she's changing. That was the comment. The good comment that I've heard from staff at Mountain View Middle School that I speak to have said she drank the Kool-Aid, fully drank the Kool-Aid. Just recently I've heard, well, she's trying. So perhaps there was a change of heart there. Nicole Doherty drank the Kool-Aid. That's what I heard, drank the Kool-Aid. Just recently has decided to treat staff. I've heard one comment where they said, oh, no, she's becoming nice. Whatever that means. I don't know if that gets us academic rigor or better discipline, or if that gets us better leadership. But it's what we have to work with. So we have a biased committee that has formed a biased committee. Now the next step, once the committee has done its work on the 2 days, July 26th and August 9th, they're going to do their work, whatever that work is, collect all the data that they've already got, go through it, and then they're going to, Stacy is actually going to send out a request for proposal, which she didn't do the first time, which created the whole hullabaloo of there was no request for proposal. So you ended up with 3 companies that were contacted. And then now we've got 6. So 6 people have said they're interested in doing the work, and one of them is for free. Let's not forget the one who offered to do it for free. So they're going to put together all the data, and they're going to say, here you go, consultant, whoever gets that job. I prefer the one that's for free. I don't know about you. Because we've had default budgets for the past couple of years, and they scream, holy heaven, we don't have any money. We don't have any money. All right, well, if we don't have any money, let's take the guy that offered to do it for free. And he is going to, the consultant is going to collect whatever data that the MVMS study committee did not get. And they're going to give the consultant their marching orders. Here's what we want you to look for. So you get a biased committee, forming a biased committee, who's supposed to give an unbiased consultant their marching orders for what to look for. And a report is supposed to come out in October. Now, Ceresc, as you know, has been a problem because Diane McCarthy has voted, and she works for Ceresc. Ceresc was one of the companies that wanted the job and is still considered for bid. And we have a school board member who has refused to recuse herself from voting on issues. She says she was going to, but then she didn't. So she was actually a deciding vote that allowed the study to go forward, and of course her employer is one of the people that might get the job. They are charging money, by the way. But we also already have a connection with Ceresc in the fact that we already have, believe it or not, a committee that's working on discipline issues and behaviors at Mountain View Middle School. And it's Dr. Howard Muscott, who works for Ceresc, is the consultant that's working with a committee on behaviors at Mountain View Middle School. So if Ceresc gets the job, they've already got a consultant that's been in, that's talked to the administration, therefore it is biased. And even if Ceresc gets the job and Dr. Howard Muscott is not the consultant from Ceresc chosen, he's going to talk to his colleagues about what he's learned. And he's already had access to the administration there. So, bias. So let's watch if the Goffstown School Board, which Stacey Buckley has a majority of them supporting her, and she supports Jim Hunt, whether or not they vote to hire Ceresc, because Ceresc has already had contact. So in my opinion, they're already biased. Whether it's Dr. Howard Muscott that does it or not, they're already biased. Interesting to note, however, that we now acknowledge, by virtue of the fact that they've hired Ceresc to come in and do a committee for behavior, so they already acknowledge that there are discipline and behavior problems at Mountain View Middle School. So that's, again, a lack of leadership from the top, which is currently Jim Hunt. So I leave you with those three things: leadership, academic rigor, and discipline. That's what the committee is working on, and we will find out as soon as there's a request for proposal. Stacey Buckley is going to send one out. Supposedly we're going to do things right this time, which will happen sometime in August. And the consultant will then do their work with potentially a final report released in October. And we will be here, we will be watching, and we will keep you up to date with what's going on. Thanks for your time and attention, and thanks for being with me.